Welcome, everybody, to another great edition of The Rundown here on the Big Rapids Media Network. Brandon Work, Jack Heckman giving you the good stuff. We went from one side of Motown in Allen Park, and now we're going to the other side in a lot colder climate. We're talking the Detroit Red Wings today. Last season recap, acquisitions and departures, some very interesting chess moves in the offseason. We'll talk about that as well as things to watch out here for this season. And will the Red Wings make the postseason? We'll talk about all that here on the show today. But before we get into the good stuff, big thanks goes out to our great sponsors. Those include Denny's Muffler and Brakes. They're on State Street in Big Rapids. If you need basic auto repair, if you need things done with your vehicle, such as mufflers, brakes, so much more, you can find them on State Street and give them a call today. And big thanks also go out to Eagle Village. You can find a job that will impact the lives of youth and maximize your potential as an employee. To learn the ropes and learn more, visit eaglevillage.org. Eagle Village, where potential soars. All right, Jack, let's get right into it. Let's not sugarcoat it. Last season for the Red Wings was subpar. It was not a great year. We had a lot of expectations. You look at the Cinderella run from the year prior, right? The last game to try to get in, needed some help. Obviously, Mother Nature, luck didn't go our way. This past year was a year you expected to be in the postseason, and we came up really short, to be honest. And that was a very frustrating thing to see out of this club. But overall, this feels like this might be a year where you bring a lot of those key players back, you add and subtract a little bit, move that roster, those pieces around just a little bit. So I think almost this year you're coming in with the same expectations, but maybe fans aren't necessarily going to be so jumpy for it to happen. They still understand there's growing pains. So maybe this is the year we don't focus as much on being a playoff team, and maybe it just happens. Maybe it's a jinx.
Yeah, most definitely. And even going back to last season, there was a stretch, that beginning of March around that area where you lost six straight games. And you go from a team that's, 30, 23, and 4 to or 26, I should say, to a team that loses six straight and you're only 2 games above 500. This is a team that definitely had playoff potential in the middle of February. And then it comes 2 weeks into March and you have that year after year March disaster where you saw it with a team that probably should have made the playoffs 2 years ago. And then the March disaster. Last year, the March disaster. It's a team that, like you said, there's going to be growing pains, but if this team is able to grow, it's a team that can make the playoffs. I wouldn't project them to be in the playoffs, but I would say there's a great possibility that this team has the roster and the capability and the leadership to make the playoffs.
Absolutely, right? 86 points last year, but more importantly to a lot of Wings fans, right? This is the ninth straight year the winged wheel has not been announced in the Stanley Cup postseason. And that is something patience is being tried. A lot of tensions for a lot of fans saying, what's the answer, right? We trusted Stevie Y. Do we need to move him, right? Do we need to move on? There's a lot of speculation, right? A lot of question marks, but this team is still a very good roster. As you mentioned, finishing just above 500 last year, 39 wins, 35 losses, and 8 ties along the way. But I think it was really interesting to follow what happened this last year because of just the timeline that happened. Obviously, start out with Newsy, right? Obviously, a lot of things didn't go our way. Derek Lalonde obviously mentioning as the head coach. We move on from him. We pick up Todd McClellan, who has had a very historic career in the NHL and coaching ranks, and we start off red hot. We win a lot of games right away with him at the helm. We get to the All-Star break. After the All-Star break, you mentioned that skid and just kind of, everything that was going in the momentum went the opposite direction and stalled the ship. And that was really a frustrating thing to watch as fans, especially when you watch the offense kind of sputter a little bit and the defense really had its struggles quite a bit in the second half of the year. So naturally, I think when you look back at last season, looking into this season, there's a couple main things. And number one that I know we'll mention more with the roster as we go along here in the next segment, but it's going to have to be a focus on defense, and it's going to have to be a focus on consistent offense as well for how much talent we'll have at the top couple lines.
Yeah, 100%. It's been an issue. There's a whole lot of depth with that forward, those top couple forwards. But yeah, like you said, the defense is a huge issue. It's been an issue for the last couple of years. It really hasn't been addressed. You've got guys like Ben Sherratt who come in, 2, 3 years ago, were solid. They were okay, kind of hold you over players, and then you got guys like Justin Hall and Jeff Petrie who really just were not great and were not good fits for this Red Wings team. And then you have guys like Sider. And Sider is a top 20 defense, or really almost a top 20 player in hockey, a top 15 defenseman in hockey, but he hasn't really had that deep pairing, and maybe the Red Wings will finally end up finding that. But it's a huge problem between goaltending. They haven't had that true goaltender. They haven't had that true number one defensive pairing, and we'll see if the Red Wings can find it.
Absolutely. We look at the roster right now, some of the simulated as far as lineups, and you mentioned right Sider at the top of the defenseman charts and the lines with Sherratt. And then you have obviously Edmondson is in there as well. Johansson, somebody that has been in there a little bit. And you got a couple guys. Docker, I know, is one that Jack, you mentioned a little bit off the pod, bouncing back and forth. But those are some of the defensemen that obviously we're looking at. As far as forwards go, right, you have Larkin, you have Raymond, you have DeBrincat, right? Those are three stars right there. Of course, who could forget Showtime himself, 88 Patrick Kane? I mean, what a spark he's been to bring him back to Detroit. You have Casper, right? You obviously have JVR, you just brought over from Columbus, so that's a really good add for this group. And then you have Kopp, you have Soderblom, which a lot of fans want to see him do well, especially from what they've seen in Grand Rapids at the AHL. And then you got a couple guys in there as well as a new goaltender and John Gibson. But overall, what's your analysis so far of this roster, Jack?
I mean, I think the forward lines are very well rounded. Obviously, Vance Riemsdyk, I don't think is really going to be on that top line. I think DeBrincat probably plays that left wings position, and then it'll be Larkin, Raymond, and DeBrincat. That's a great top line, and this team really doesn't lack forward depth or forward potential. There's a lot of guys who could come up and call up and play that position. Like Nate Danielson could be that third line center. You have Carter Mazer out of Denver. He could come and play as well. But really, this is a well-rounded team between Soderblom, Copper, Berggren on that third line, and then Rasmussen, Kopp, and then Appleton, who his questionable contract. But this is a team that's got depth there on that forward line. And defensively, I talked about it just a little bit ago. That's a very big question mark for this team. And the goaltending was an issue previously, but I think that the Red Wings have figured that out. But it's if you can figure out Edmondson and Sider, maybe that's your top line. Or if Sherratt plays up with Sider, you have to have a dominant top line, I think, defensively for this team to be successful on defense. And there really hasn't been a whole lot successful defensively. This team that ends up allowing a lot of goals and, goalie being a question mark. But yeah, this is a team that defensively, if they can figure it out, this is a team that can make the playoffs.
Absolutely. You mentioned the depth defensively, the consistency there is probably going to be one of the top, if not the top priority. Goaltending consistency was a little up and down last year. Obviously, you bring in John Gibson to try to solve that problem, right? Peter Mrazek was in there. Then you obviously saw some other guys that have kind of really trickled through this roster the last couple of years when it comes to some of those guys. There's a guy, obviously, in the AHL that everybody's very excited about, right? And Sebastian Cossa, we saw him for a handful of games last year. Didn't see quite what we think we wanted. And I think especially Coach McClellan wanted to see. So he's been kind of up and down. Maybe we can see the best out of him this year. Obviously, Cam Talbot still on the roster as a number two guy you can throw in as well. But that might be a big area that I think a lot of people might not necessarily talk about from last year's team because of the fact that there was a lot of top line scoring left and right, which you mentioned guys like Larkin, DeBrincat, as well as Patrick Kane, right? Lucas Raymond, those guys always filled it. But the back end obviously is the more end we were watching. So maybe the defensive prowess could be a good thing. Maybe some of these upgrades might be able to help a little bit. But I think there's one thing for sure. There's going to be a lot of pressure going on that next level down at the AHL when it comes to the Griffins guys playing defense because some of those guys are going to be heavily relied on, especially since we had some injury issues last year. A couple guys like Kopp that were out for some extended time on the defensive side as well. So that's going to be a big area to look at. But I think overall, goaltending consistency might be something we got to be a little bit more aware of this coming year to see how they address that. And then also the depth scoring, right? We know the top two lines can score 3-4. That's more where we're wondering, hey, can these guys put in the back of the net this year?
Yeah, 100%. And the Red Wings' huge advantage is I think a lot of people is the power play. It was the best power play from since McClellan came over. That was one of the best power play units in all of hockey. And I think that's a thing where they run the 1-3-1 where you got the bumper low and then you got your three guys in the middle and then Sider's that quarterback at the top pretty much. And if they can take advantage of that power play again, and that can be a huge thing for this team, is there's a lot of teams who end up struggling on the power play. And it's one of the easiest ways to score and the easiest ways to take advantage of your opponent is that power play unit between Raymond, Larkin, Kane, DeBrincat, and Sider. Kane, one of the greatest American scorers, the greatest American hockey player. Larkin is a huge piece for this team. And the captain, and then Raymond's one of the best under 25 players in the entire league, and DeBrincat is just a pure scorer that can go out and score 40 goals a year. And then Sider's just that quarterback at the top, and that's really what he needs to be on this power play, and that's a huge thing this Red Wings team can go out and take advantage of.
100%. And we obviously talked about the Tigers, and you can find that wherever you are listening to this show, WBRN.com, or in the YouTube feed below. Not as much negatives. Let's talk some positives here. Obviously, you mentioned, Jack, the best team, obviously, post coaching change when it comes to the power play. We were able to score on special teams very well this last year, and we hope that continues into this year. The young core is something that's very exciting, right? And we've obviously had rumblings of, there could be a lot of guys, there could be some guys here and there the last couple of years, but this year really feels like with some of the draft picks brought in, right? You got guys like Casper, we mentioned earlier on. Edmondson, of course, is still kind of getting himself to the how can I play consistently at the top level at the NHL. And then you obviously have guys like Raymond that are going to be around that are locked up for quite some time, right? Along with the captain, Dylan Larkin. So that's a very exciting thing as well. But you got other prospects as well. Danielson's going to be a guy that you're going to be really looking at. As far as Sandlin Palinka, he's another name that's been brought up quite a bit. And I think there's a lot of things that can be offered there. Missouri as well. We saw for a little bit of him here and there, and obviously played great with the Griffins this last year. Will that translate to the NHL level? That's going to be something that a lot of these coaches are going to want. And the good thing is, along with that young core, you got the guys that have been there. You got the Dylan Larkins of the world, the Patrick Kanes, the John Gibsons that have played quite a bit of hockey that can be able to not only let them learn the ropes, but guide them along the way.
Yeah, most definitely. There's a lot of veteran leadership on this team that can lead this team, and that's one of the greatest things you can have for a team that's got a lot of young core. And you think about it between Marco Casper, he can, grow and be that everyday second line center, and you're playing behind the captain, Dylan Larkin, who's that first line center, and who's on your line except for the greatest American hockey player and one of the best goal scorers in the NHL. Between DeBrincat and Kane being around Casper, that line can grow Casper in not just for this season, but the next 5 to 10 seasons and for the rest of his NHL career. That could be one of the things that benefits him in his entire career is being on a line with Patrick Kane. And this team has got, Solarblom. He can grow into his own. Berggren, grow into his own again if he can find that true spot and keep that spot. And then Edvinson, he can be, that number one left-handed defenseman and pair with Sider. But that's the thing is there's nobody else on that defensive aspect from, able to take over and grow with him. There's no really a left-handed defenseman that's like a top player in, the NHL where you have, it's guys who are just kind of average, get over the hump guys to come in and play every night. And like you said, you have guys with William Wallander down in the AHL and Axel Sandpolinka. Those are two guys who can come up and play for this Red Wings team. But it's really going to be, I'm really curious on how that defensive team and group ends up playing out.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of size with that defensive group, especially you look at guys, right, that how especially like Edmondson at Sider that are these really big guys that can play well. Maybe the physicality is more where we're looking to see where this guy with this grouping, I should say, and this coaching staff sees this personnel group and say, hey, we can improve on the physicality part. Can we be the guys that are the enforcers? Can we get guys in the boards? Can we be able to win puck battles along the boards and make that an offensive transition and counter opportunity? That'll be very interesting. Looking at some key games, especially going into next year, season will open up officially. I got the date right in front of me. It's October 9th against the Montreal Canadiens, or of course you got to have an original six matchup to start the season because why not? So that'll be a very interesting one to see right off the bat. And then you got back-to-back later on in October against the Maple Leafs. That'll be a very good team this coming year. Will they make it past in the playoffs? We won't talk about that if there's any Toronto fans listening. Obviously you got the Panthers, right? They're on the schedule this year. That'll be October 15th. It's the two-time defending Stanley Cup champions. Even though it's in Florida and it's warm, they bring it on the ice. There's no doubt about it. You'll play Tampa Bay later on in the year. New Year's Eve will be a very interesting matchup. I saw this one with the Winnipeg Jets, so that'll be at Little Caesars, right? And especially against a divisional team, right? Like that group and that Winnipeg Jets team, that'll be a very interesting matchup. You got the Penguins to start off the new year, and then of course you finish the season where else if you're getting postseason ready, but at the Panthers in Florida. So that'll be on April 15th, but some big notable games there. And I'll be very excited to see how they play against Montreal, a team that has given us way more fits than it looks like you should on paper, but great overall strength of schedule. This should be a team that should be battle tested, but have some very winnable stretches as well to start to collect points in bunches if possible.
Yeah, most definitely. I think the most intriguing part of a team schedule, especially on the East Coast, is those West Coast trips. The Red Wings, they got end of October and the beginning of November, you're at the Kings in Anaheim, in San Jose, in Vegas. You got another one a little bit after that at the beginning of December. You're in Columbus, in Seattle, in Vancouver, in Calgary, in Edmonton, and then you're back in Chicago. That's a week-long trip where that's a 10-day long trip where this is a team where we've seen teams countless years in and years out struggle with the long road trips, and that's really just across any sport. But yeah, this is a team that's got some intriguing matchups, and I think, like you said, they're going to be battle tested. This is a team that's on the brinks of a playoff if they can stay healthy, and they still have $12 million in cap space this offseason, and rumored around a ton of different guys to bring in. But it's just going to be intriguing how they end up attacking the beginning of that next season, where you got your first 7 games are, like you said, Montreal, Toronto, Florida, Tampa Bay, Edmonton, and then even Buffalo after that. Those are, real tough games to start the season, and Buffalo is going to be a team that can be in the playoffs with an intriguing roster they have over there in Buffalo.
100%. And you mentioned some of those rumored guys, Jack. Is there one on the top of your head that's saying, this guy's out here, Stevie Y? Maybe we look that direction. If there's somebody that you see out there in free agency that'll help this team this year right now, who is that and why?
I think it's gonna be Brian Rust with the Pittsburgh Penguins. They've been rumored around him really the last couple week, and he's a Michigan guy. Went to the University of Michigan. Solid stats last season. I think he had around 65 points or something like that. Yeah, 65 points, 31 goals, 34 assists, a negative 21 plus minus in 71 games, and he's got 434 career or 437 career points. This is a guy that he's out of Pontiac, Michigan, third round draft pick in 2012 or 2010, I should say. But this is a guy that can go out and be a key piece in that top six, maybe a top end of the bottom six on those forward depths. But I mean, anything this Red Wings team I think brings in right now is a benefit, and really they can bring in pieces that you're maybe one piece away from one more point that gets you into the playoffs. Or if you lose a guy for 4 games, you lose 4 points. You're just that much out of the playoffs. And I think that's how close and how key some injuries can be on in the season for this Red Wings team that could make or break their playoffs.
Absolutely. And I've heard a lot of the Rust rumors as well. Maybe he's returning back to the Mitten. We'll wait and see. And there's a lot of guys that are still out there. I'm looking at some of them on the list. A lot of older defensemen. When you talk about a lot of these guys, Boston roots. If a guy like Grillcheck, you have Dumoulin that's also out there. He's 33 years old. Nate Schmidt as well with Winnipeg, 61 games played last year. He's 34 years old. So a lot of veteran defensemen out in the market as well. But when it comes to a lot of the forwards, a lot younger. But you know what that means? A lot more money. So we'll see what CBY has in mind with this group. And this year it should be a very exciting Red Wings season. We'll have the games carried for you here on News Radio WBRN. So tune in 96.5 FM during the season, and we'll play as many games as we can. Obviously, the Lions will obviously be in there as well, so we might have some Sunday conflicts, but we're going to get you all the games in such throughout the season. And you can catch us covering some of those games as well here on the rundown here throughout the fall. We'll cover obviously high school sports and of course football, but we'll also get you to Lions and Red Wings, so on and so forth. So it should be very exciting indeed, and we can't wait to bring that to you here this year. Should be a very exciting season for the Winged Wheel, Jack. I know I'm trying to get to some games. I know you are too. If there's a dream series or games or two that you would want to see, that's why I want to see him play Florida. I want to see him play the champs. I want to see how they fare, especially in LCA. That would probably be my pick, but what would be yours if you could pick one?
Yeah, I would say honestly, this is a little bit of an outside take, but I think it's Buffalo because they're so comparable teams that could be a team that's your wild card one team and your wild card two team that ends up playing in the playoffs.
I like it indeed. We'll see if we can score some tickets on Ticketmaster later after we end this show, which speaking of which, we'll do so right now. Thank you all for watching. If you're with us here on YouTube, thanks for listening. If you're here live with us on 96.5 FM or the mobile app, or as well, WBRN.com, you can take us wherever you go. Jack, we will meet next week, and we'll talk some more sports here on The Rundown, presented by Big Rapids Daily News.